At dinner, my son said, "You're out. Sign the deed." He didn't whisper it. He said it like he was calling a vote. I stayed silent. I set my fork down, folded my napkin once, and kept my face calm. Then, the notary called. Not to schedule, to warn, because she'd been asked to notarize my signature tonight. Across the table, my daughter-in-law smiled like this was family business, and my grandson swung his legs under the chair like he couldn't wait for dessert. My hand brushed the digital recorder in my pocket, habit from widow paperwork, when misunderstandings can cost you everything. On the sideboard sat a manila envelope with my name typed too neatly. My son tapped it twice. "Open it." I didn't rush. I didn't flinch. "Tell me exactly what was changed. What would you do?" The dining room looked staged for a photograph. Candles, water glasses, a centerpiece that smelled like grocery store roses. That's when I noticed the place card in front of me, written in thick marker, like I was being labeled instead of welcomed. My son had always been particular when he wanted something. He slid the envelope closer with 2 fingers, like he didn't want to smudge his own plan. I lifted it slowly, feeling the weight of paper and intent. But that wasn't the worst part. A yellow sticky note peeked out from the first page inside. "Sign here." A black arrow, bold and impatient, pointed to a signature line. Evidence seed number 1 sat right there, bright as a hazard sign. My son's voice stayed smooth. "It's simple. You're out. Sign the deed." Out. Out of the house I'd paid for. Out of the kitchen where I'd cooked every birthday cake. Out of the life I'd built while he was still learning how to tie his shoes. I kept my eyes on the paper, not his face. That's when I realized the tone wasn't help. It was eviction dressed up as concern. My daughter-in-law leaned forward, palms open like she was offering comfort. "Mom, we'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry." Worry. Like my independence was a mess they were cleaning. My grandson piped up without looking at me. "So when do we start changing the rooms?" Dad said we can make the office a game room. Changing the rooms. Like I was already gone. I stayed silent, because silence keeps you from saying something you can't take back. It also forces other people to keep talking, and people reveal themselves when they fill the quiet. My son pushed the uncapped pen toward my hand. Perfect placement, rehearsed angle. Then I noticed how his knee bounced under the table. He wasn't calm. He was forcing calm. He said, "Lower now. Don't make this hard." I didn't answer. I stood, picked up the manila envelope, and walked to the kitchen like I was carrying my own mail. Behind me, I heard my son's chair scrape, sharp and angry. My daughter-in-law called after me, too sweet. "Don't be dramatic." But my phone buzzed in my pocket the moment I reached the sink. Unknown number. I answered, and a woman's voice, professional, careful, said, "Ma'am, I'm a notary. I was scheduled to notarize a deed transfer from you tonight. Are you safe to talk?" My throat tightened, but my voice didn't. "Yes," I said. "I'm safe." A pause, like she was choosing her words with legal scissors. "I can't discuss your documents," she said, "but I can tell you this. If a signer is pressured, I stop. If a son insists on explaining for the mother, I stop. I called because something about this felt wrong. Felt wrong. A stranger saw it in minutes. My own family had spent months polishing it. I looked back through the doorway at the table. Candles still flickering, my son's pen still waiting. I kept my expression smooth. "Thank you," I told her quietly. I ended the call and my hand slid to my pocket again, pressing the recorder like it was a rosary. Because now I knew 2 things. They weren't asking, they were executing. And my son believed my silence meant surrender. What happens when you refuse to sign, and they decide to make you the problem? I didn't go back to the table. I stayed in the kitchen long enough to wash my hands, slowly, like I wasn't shaking inside. Then I walked out, picked up my purse, and said calmly, "I'm leaving." My son stood fast. "Sit down." I stayed silent. I didn't argue with a command. I simply walked past him. That's when I felt it. The way the room tightened, like my leaving cracked their timeline. My daughter-in-law tried to catch my eye. "Mom, you're upset. Let's talk tomorrow." Tomorrow was what they wanted. Tomorrow meant another setup. In the car, I placed the manila envelope on the passenger seat like it was a live wire. At home, I locked the door behind me and checked the deadbolt twice. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I looked for my spare key. It wasn't on the hook by the entryway, and my stomach dropped, slow and heavy. But that wasn't the worst part. 3 months earlier, my son had asked for that spare for emergencies. He'd said it like it was responsible. He'd said it like he cared. I'd handed it over because he was my son, and mothers don't like imagining emergencies. Now I pictured him copying it without telling me, smiling while he did. I set the digital recorder on my kitchen counter, plugged it into charge, and opened my journal. A clean page, a date. Dinner, deed demand, notary warning call. Facts first. Then I opened the manila envelope with both hands, careful not to tear anything, because tearing paper feels like losing control. Inside was a deed transfer packet, neatly stacked, my name typed as the grantor. The grantee? My son. No mention of my protection. No mention of my wishes. Just transfer. I flipped the pages and saw a line that made my mouth go dry. Purpose: to remove current occupant from title. Occupant. Not mother, not homeowner. Occupant. Then I noticed the sticky note again. Sign here, like a child's homework reminder. As if my rights were a checkbox. My phone buzzed. A text from my son. Don't be stubborn. This is for your safety. Safety. The word people use when they want authority without admitting it. I didn't reply. I kept reading. That's when I found evidence seed number 2. A printed email confirmation was clipped inside the packet. Mobile notary appointment, 7:30 p.m. The address listed wasn't my house. It was my son's. My son had planned to relocate the signing to his territory, where he controlled the chairs, the voices, the exits. And my name would be the only thing needed from me. Then I saw handwriting in the margin. Quick, familiar strokes. If she hesitates, remind her she can't live alone. I recognized my son's handwriting the way you recognize your child's laugh. I sat very still. I didn't cry. Crying would be for later, alone, when it wouldn't be used against me. I turned to a fresh page in my journal and wrote carefully. Spare key missing, signing location, son's address, handwritten coercion note. That's when I realized I needed more than anger. I needed a mechanism. A clean, realistic process that didn't require my family's permission. My mind went to the notary's voice. I document refusals. Document. That word again. I checked my phone call log and saved the notary's number under a simple name. Marisol, notary. Then my phone rang. My son. I answered without warmth. Hello? He didn't waste time. Where did you go? Marisol's coming. Don't make me chase you. Chase. Like I was a runaway. I kept my voice even. I'm not signing anything tonight. His breath went sharp. You don't get to decide that. I looked at the deed packet on my table and the pen he'd placed like bait. I do, I said. His voice turned cold. If you won't cooperate, we'll make it official. We'll prove you can't manage your affairs. There it was, the next weapon. Not a pen, an accusation. I ended the call and wrote one more line in my journal. Threat, competency narrative. Then I opened my drawer, pulled out my trust documents and charity beneficiary list, and stacked them neatly in the manila envelope. If they were coming for paper, I would meet them with paper. And in the morning, before anyone could corner me again, I was going to find out what had already been filed. What if my son wasn't just planning? What if he was already recording my life as his? In the morning, I dressed like I was running errands, not walking into a fight. Gray slacks, white blouse, calm face. I packed my journal, the manila envelope, and my phone charger like a soldier packing quiet supplies. The digital recorder slid into my pocket, fully charged. Before I left, I checked my front door again. That's when I noticed a fresh scratch on the deadbolt plate. Tiny, new, like someone had tested a key. My lungs tightened, but my hands stayed steady. Because fear is useful only if you turn it into action. At the county recorder's office, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled like dust and toner. I approached the counter and asked for a certified copy of the current deed on my property. The clerk didn't look surprised. She looked tired, the way someone looks when they've seen family wars and paperwork form all day. Name and address? She asked. I gave both. She typed, clicked, and frowned slightly. Then she said, "We can provide certified copies. I'll need to verify the most recent recording." Most recent recording. My stomach sank in slow motion. I kept my voice neutral. Has anything changed? I can't advise, she said, but I can print what's on file. She walked away. I opened my journal and wrote, Recorder's Office, certified copy requested. That's when I heard my name behind me. Mom. I turned. My son stood there with his wife and my grandson, like they'd followed a GPS pin straight to my defense. My son smiled too casually. I figured you'd try something. Try something. Like protecting myself was a hobby. My daughter-in-law nodded at the counter. We're just making sure everything is handled. She forgets details. Forgets. They were building the story out loud now. But that wasn't the worst part. My grandson chewing gum said, Dad said if you won't sign, you'll have to move anyway. Anyway. As if my choice didn't matter. My son stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was doing me a favor. You're making this public. Public. He didn't want truth. He wanted control in private. I slid my hand into my pocket and pressed the recorder button. Evidence seed number 3 began with a click only I could feel. My son hissed, Listen, you sign the deed, we keep you safe. You refuse, we file for intervention. Intervention. A halo word. I looked at him calmly. You mean guardianship. He blinked once, quick. And in that blink, I saw the surprise. He didn't expect me to name the thing. My daughter-in-law snapped, Don't use legal terms you don't understand. I smiled softly. Then I asked very quietly, Why was the signing scheduled at your address? My son's wife answered too fast. Convenience. Convenience that isolates. Convenience that corners. My son leaned in. Last chance. Dinner tonight. Notary. Attorney on standby. You sign, and this gets easy. Attorney on standby. So they were escalating. They weren't backing down. They were adding professionals like props. The clerk returned and handed me a printed receipt, proof of my request, and told me the certified copy would be processed. I took it, tucked it into my manila envelope, and kept my face calm. My son watched the envelope like it was dangerous. It was. Then he raised his voice, just enough for nearby people to hear. She's confused, he said. She doesn't remember what she agreed to. Confused. In public. A label, planted like a flag. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I didn't give it oxygen. I kept my voice level. I remember, and I'm not signing. My grandson snickered. She's being dramatic. Dramatic. Another word to shrink me. My daughter-in-law reached for my arm, lightly, like it could be called guiding. I stepped back without jerking, without scene. I simply looked at her hand until she removed it. Then I turned to leave. My son called after me. If you fight us, we'll prove you can't live alone. Prove. That word again. I got into my car, hands steady on the wheel, and stared at the manila envelope on my passenger seat. Inside it were documents. Proof. But I knew what was coming next. A meeting, a pen, a notary, and a story they'd tell to anyone who would listen. Tonight at dinner, they'd try to turn my silence into consent. So how do you walk into your own ambush and still leave with your name intact? I didn't drive home to hide. I drove home to prepare. Then I called my attorney. Not because an attorney is a savior. Because law is structure, and structure is what predators hate. Ms. Klein answered with a calm voice that didn't rise for drama. I handle deed disputes and elder law, she said. Start from the beginning. I told her everything. The dinner demand. You're out. Sign the deed. The notary's warning call. The sticky note sign here. The appointment confirmation at my son's address. The recorder's office encounter. My son labeling me confused in public. She listened without interrupting, then said, Good. You have a timeline and you have evidence. That's when I realized my silence at dinner wasn't weakness. It was discipline. Ms. Klein instructed me to email photos of the deed packet and the handwritten margin note. Then she said, We're going to do 3 things today. First, confirm current deed status using certified copies. Second, file a written notice of non-consent and discuss a property fraud alert if your county offers it. Third, protect your autonomy in case they push a competency narrative. That third part landed like a stone, because I'd heard my son say it. Prove you can't manage. Ms. Klein didn't sugarcoat it. They may try adult protective services or a welfare check, she said. They may suggest guardianship. We beat narratives with documentation. Documentation, the word again. Then she added, "And we use notary standards. A notary cannot proceed if a signer is coerced or unwilling." That was the mechanism. Not magic. Process. Ms. Klein told me to call the notary who warned me, Marisol, and ask for a written statement of why she called and why she declined. I did it on speaker with Ms. Klein listening. Marisol's voice stayed professional. I was told the son would explain and that the signer was agreeable. That language concerned me. I called to ensure the signer was safe and willing. I would have declined if I sensed coercion. A statement like that doesn't shout. It stands. I wrote the time in my journal. Then I flipped to the birthday dinner page and underlined the quote my son had spoken. "You're out. Sign the deed." Then I wrote beneath it, "Refused, no signature." Evidence seed number 1 began paying off right there, because the sticky note, the arrow, and the setup showed intent to rush. But that wasn't the worst part. My son texted while I was still writing. "Dinner 6:30, don't embarrass us again." Embarrass. Always the same leash. Shame. Ms. Klein's reply was blunt. "Don't go alone." I didn't have a parade of supporters. I didn't want my pain turned into a spectacle. But I did want a witness who understood paper. So I called my neighbor, Lila, a retired paralegal who'd spent decades organizing files for attorneys. One sentence, one credential, nothing dramatic. I can sit quietly and take notes. That's it. That's all I needed. I printed copies of everything and stacked them in my manila envelope. The sticky note sign here still attached. The email appointment confirmation with my son's address. The handwritten margin note about she can't live alone. The recorder's office receipt. My trust documents and charity beneficiary list stayed in the same folder, not to threaten, but to remind myself. My estate was mine to direct. Then I checked my recorder settings. My attorney had already confirmed that recording my own interactions for documentation was permitted where I lived. No tricks. No entrapment. Just preserving my own reality. As dusk approached, another text arrived, this time from my daughter-in-law. "We already spoke to Adult Protective Services, just FYI. APS. They weren't just pushing papers. They were building a case of words. I sat at my kitchen table, journal open, pen in hand, and wrote a single line. If they can't take my signature, they'll try to take my credibility. Then I closed the journal and picked up my keys. Because tonight, I wasn't walking into dinner to argue. I was walking in to force the truth into the record. And if they planned to push me out with a pen, I'd push back with process. Would the notary at that table follow their script or the standards of her seal? My son's dining room looked perfect again. Candles, a clean table runner, a folder placed dead center like the main course. And on the edge of the table, almost casual, sat a blank clipboard welfare check report template, like a threat waiting for ink. I arrived with Lila beside me, quiet, calm, not carrying a weapon, just a notepad and a steady gaze. My daughter-in-law's smile tightened when she saw her. "Oh," she said, "you brought someone." I stayed silent. I took my seat. I placed my manila envelope on the table with a soft thump that made the candle flame tremble. My son's jaw flexed. Then he opened the folder and slid the deed packet toward me like a waiter presenting a dish. "You're out. Sign the deed," he said. Louder now, as if volume could replace consent. I didn't touch the pen. I didn't touch the paper. I looked at the notary sitting at the far end of the table. Different from Marisol, a man with a stamp kit and a neutral face. My daughter-in-law leaned forward, speaking fast. "We're simplifying. She gets overwhelmed. We're protecting her. Overwhelmed. Protecting. Halo words again. But that wasn't the worst part. My grandson muttered, "Just sign so we can be done. Be done. With my life." I let the silence stretch one extra second. Then I addressed the notary, voice calm. "Sir, before anything happens, if I tell you I feel pressured, can you proceed?" The notary hesitated. "No, ma'am. I cannot notarize if you're unwilling or coerced." My son snapped. "Nobody is coercing her." His wife added sharply, "She's doing this for attention." Attention. As if dignity were a performance. That's when I did the one thing they didn't rehearse for. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. Then I hit call. Marisol. On speaker. My son leaned forward, furious. "What are you doing?" The phone rang once, twice. Then Marisol answered. Hello? I kept my voice steady. Marisol, this is the signer you called last night. Can you confirm why you called me? Her pause was brief, then her professional tone filled the room. I was asked to notarize a deed transfer, she said. I was told the son would explain, and that the signer was agreeable. That raised concern. I called to ensure the signer was safe and willing. I would decline under coercion. The second notary's eyes shifted. First to my son, then to my daughter-in-law. My son barked, "This is ridiculous." Ridiculous. Like a professional standard was a joke. I opened my manila envelope slowly and slid the sticky note page forward. Sign here, arrow and all. Then the appointment confirmation sheet with my son's address. Then the recorder's office receipt proving I'd requested certified copies. Each page landed on the table like a quiet bell. Lila's pen moved steadily, taking notes without commentary. My daughter-in-law's voice turned sharp. Mom, if you don't sign, we'll make sure you can't stay in that house. Make sure. She said it like she had authority. My son pointed at the pen. Sign it, or we file. File. Guardianship. APS. Welfare check. All of it waiting behind that word. I didn't rise to the bait. I turned to the notary and asked the key question Ms. Klein had coached. Sir, do I appear willing right now? The notary looked at my son's flushed face, looked at my daughter-in-law's clenched hands, looked at the pen being shoved toward me. Then he said carefully, I cannot proceed in this environment. I'm declining to notarize. The room went still, then snapped. My son slammed his palm on the table. She's manipulating you. My daughter-in-law stood abruptly. Fine. If you won't sign, we'll do a welfare check. Tonight. Tonight. Immediate. Punitive. They weren't done. They were switching tools. I stayed silent for one beat, then spoke in a voice that didn't shake. Do what you have to do, I said. So will I. My grandson scoffed, but his eyes flicked to the papers like he finally understood there were rules bigger than him. My son's wife grabbed the blank welfare check clipboard and marched toward the door like she couldn't wait to write me into a box. And as I sat there with the candles burning down, I understood the next battle wasn't the deed. It was the narrative. Would my documentation hold when the knock came from someone with a badge and a clipboard? The welfare check didn't come that night. It came the next afternoon, when sunlight makes everything look ordinary, exactly how cruelty likes to arrive. 2 officers stood on my porch with a social worker holding a clipboard. Polite voices, professional posture. A process meant to protect and sometimes misused to control. I opened the door with my shoulders back. I didn't argue at the threshold. I invited them to my kitchen table, because kitchens tell the truth. Mail on the counter. A grocery list stuck under a magnet. Medication organized in a weekly box. A life that runs on routine, not confusion. The social worker introduced herself, then looked at me carefully. We received concerns about your ability to manage independently, she said. I nodded once. I expected that. I didn't sound angry. I sounded prepared. Because the difference between being targeted and being protected is whether you can show your reality on paper. I asked calmly, would you like water, coffee? One officer shook his head politely. The other glanced around the room, taking in the small details that can't be faked. Clean counters, a calendar with appointments written in my own hand, the way I moved without hesitation. The social worker said, I'm going to ask you a few questions. I said, of course. Then I slid my manila envelope across the table. Inside was my journal, dated entries, exact quotes, and the dinner demand written in ink. You're out. Sign the deed. Inside were printed texts from my son and daughter-in-law about filing if I didn't cooperate. Inside was Marisol's written statement, emailed to my attorney, explaining why she called and why she refused. Inside was the county recorder receipt showing I'd requested certified copies. And on top, because I wanted them to see it first, was the certified copy itself, stamped, dated, official. That stamp mattered. It wasn't my opinion. It was the county's record. The officer asked, has any deed been recorded changing ownership? I lifted the certified copy and held it steady so he could read the header. No, I said, and I am formally refusing any transfer under pressure. The social worker's eyes sharpened as she read the journal timeline. I watched her expression shift from routine check to pattern recognition. Then she asked, "Do you feel safe in your home?" I answered honestly. "From strangers, yes. From family members trying to force a property transfer, no." Family. The word doesn't excuse misconduct when the paperwork is clear. But that wasn't the worst part. My daughter-in-law appeared at the end of my driveway, loud enough for the porch to hear. "She forgets things," she called. "She can't live alone. She's confused." Confused. Again. Always that word. Like if she repeated it enough, it would become true. One officer stepped outside and spoke to her calmly. "What are your specific concerns?" he asked. "Give me examples." Specifics are where narratives die. My daughter-in-law offered feelings, not facts. She's stubborn, she said, voice sharpening. "She won't listen." Stubborn. Not unsafe, not disoriented. Stubborn. And stubborn isn't a reason to strip someone of rights. The social worker remained at my table, flipping through my documents. She paused on Marisol's statement, then on the printed appointment confirmation showing my son's address as the signing location. Her brow tightened. "Did they attempt to isolate you for signing?" she asked. I kept my voice level. "Yes, the appointment was scheduled at their house, not mine. They wanted me surrounded." She nodded, then looked up. "Have you signed anything?" "No," I said, and I told the notary I was unwilling. I didn't add drama. I didn't perform fear. I let the facts speak. Then the social worker asked questions. Standard, careful, date, time, where I shop, who I call in emergencies, how I manage bills. I answered without hesitation, because this is my life, and I know it. I even showed her my bill folder, organized by month, with a simple checklist I keep inside. Not because I needed to prove anything to strangers, because my son had forced me into a world where proof mattered more than trust. The officer returned from outside and said, "Ma'am, we're done here." My daughter-in-law's voice rose from the driveway. "You're just believing her?" The officer's tone stayed neutral but firm. "We're observing and documenting. Ma'am is oriented and has documentation." Documentation. Again. That word that keeps the ground from shifting under your feet. The social worker gave me a card and said, "If they continue using welfare checks as pressure, contact us. We document misuse and patterns." Pattern. A word that becomes a shield when it's written down. She lowered her voice slightly and added, "You did the right thing by keeping records." I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just nodded because relief can look like weakness to the wrong people. After they left, I stood at my front window and watched my daughter-in-law march back to her car, furious, arms stiff at her sides. My grandson sat in the passenger seat staring at his phone like this was content. My son wasn't visible, but I could feel him behind it, pushing, calculating, waiting for a different angle. I didn't wave. I didn't go outside. I let them leave with nothing. Then I sat back down at my kitchen table and wrote the time in my journal. Welfare check, cleared. Documentation reviewed. No action against me. I added one more line because it mattered. Threat escalated. Narrative attack. Because that's what it was. They couldn't get my signature, so they tried to get authority to sign for me. I didn't waste the momentum. I drove straight to Ms. Klein's office. Her receptionist greeted me by name like I belonged there, which I did. Ms. Klein met me with a folder already open. "We'll formalize," she said. We filed a written notice of non-consent regarding any deed transfer attempt. We discussed property fraud monitoring options available through the recorder's office. We drafted a formal instruction letter. All further legal communication goes through counsel, not because I wanted war, because I wanted peace with boundaries. Then we handled the next layer, competency games. Ms. Klein said, "We don't wait for them to label you. We document your competency proactively." She scheduled a third-party competency evaluation with a geriatric psychiatrist. Neutral, documented. No family members arranging the appointment. No help that comes with strings. The evaluation wasn't insulting. It was clinical, thorough, and fair. Questions, memory checks, reasoning scenarios, daily living routines, financial awareness, decision-making. At one point, the doctor asked me, "Why do you think your family is doing this?" I didn't rant. I said simply, "They want my house. They want control. And they thought I'd stay quiet." The doctor nodded, made a note, and kept going. At the end, she sealed the report, stamped and dated, and handed it to my attorney's office. A seal can be quiet. A seal can also be final. Ms. Klein placed a copy in my file and said, "This makes guardianship petitions much harder for them to misuse." Harder. Not impossible. But the law works best when you respect its steps. And I was respecting every step. That same week, I called a locksmith and rekeyed every exterior door. No grand announcement, no confrontation, just action. The locksmith arrived with a small metal case, tested the old keys, and shook his head. "This key's been copied," he said. Matter of fact, like it was weather. My chest tightened, but I kept my face still. He rekeyed the locks and handed me new keys, bright cuts, clean edges. I held them like a boundary you can feel in your palm. Then I took my spare key hook down entirely. No more emergency copies floating in other people's pockets. Next, I removed my son from emergency contacts. I updated my doctor's office and pharmacy. I tightened access to my medical information, because confused is a word that spreads fast when people are motivated. I also reviewed my banking and insurance beneficiaries, not because money was the point, but because control always tries to slip into the gaps. Ms. Klein helped me add a simple safeguard: written instructions that any significant changes require my direct confirmation and a witness from my attorney's office. Realistic, administrative, effective. Then I updated my estate plan. Not dramatically, not with speeches, just carefully. Notarized, filed. My trust documents and charity beneficiary list stayed in my own control, where they belonged. I didn't change things out of spite. I changed them out of clarity. People who try to evict you at dinner don't get to claim family as a reward later. The first time my son realized the locks were changed, he didn't knock politely. He pounded. I didn't open the door. I spoke through it, calm. "What do you want?" His voice was tight. "My key doesn't work." I said, "That's correct." A pause. Then sharper, "You can't do this." I held the new keys in my hand and felt how small they were compared to the power they represented. "I can," I said. "Because it's my house." He tried one more time, softer now, like he was switching masks. "Mom, you're overreacting. Overreacting. A word meant to shame you back into being convenient." I didn't bite. I said, "If you have anything legal to say, call my attorney." Then I stepped away from the door. Not because I was afraid, because conversation was his tool. Process was mine. That night, my son called. His voice carried fury and wounded pride, like my refusal was a betrayal. "You humiliated us," he said. I stayed silent for one beat, the way I'd stayed silent at dinner. Then I answered calmly, "You tried to take my home over a meal." He snapped, "It was for your own good." I looked at my new keys on the counter, the sealed evaluation report copy in my file folder, and my journal closed but ready. "For my own good," I repeated softly. "Then you should be relieved. I'm protected now." His breathing changed, sharp, controlled. In the background, I heard my daughter-in-law's voice, angry and urgent. "She's turning everyone against us, as if accountability was betrayal." I didn't argue with the background. I addressed the reality. "I'm not turning anyone," I said. "Your actions did that." He tried again, voice lowering. "So what now?" Now. I liked that question, because it meant he couldn't pretend nothing happened. "Now," I said, "you stop bringing papers to my table. You stop using welfare checks as punishment. And you stop speaking about me like I'm an object you can move." Silence. Longer this time. Then he said, through clenched teeth, "You'll regret this." Regret. A threat dressed as prophecy. I didn't answer with fear. I answered with policy. "If you show up again," I said, "I'll document it, and my attorney will respond." I hung up without pleading, without explaining, without apologizing for having rights. After I ended the call, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my journal to a clean line. I wrote the date. I wrote the time. Then I wrote one sentence, slow and neat. "Dignity isn't loud. It's documented." And in the silence of my own home, my home, still in my name, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Safe, not because someone promised it. Safe, because I enforced it.